Dear friends, welcome to another episode of the Folklore of Cornwall. This place of mystery and magic and of darkness and light, of raging seas and standing stones where the land whispers its stories and breathes life into the folklore. In this episode we will be looking at more of the folklore of Cornwall. So let us see who we can find on our wander over the hills. So here we are once more in Cornwall, Kernow as it is known in the original ancient language of this Celtic county. The ancient people from here were the Dumnonii, and these people also lived in Brittany region of northern France and also Devon, the tribe or smaller tribes making up a whole people who were widely spread, and the stories are so similar in all of these places that the roots of this tribe infused the common folklore of all three large regions. These were the same people. Even the legends of King Arthur, Merlin, and the knights of the kingdom are common to all three places, and the country of Wales too, another Celtic country, with other Celtic people. Sometimes people will say to me, we have similar story from our parts of the world, and this shows how folklore spreads. It's a part of us, it is a part of the people, all of the people, part of our core history, even if we don't realise it until we think about it and talk about it to others. Folklore binds us together as inhabitants of our beautiful green and blue planet, no matter the race, religion, or individual genetic histories. Story is the web that connects us to our ancestors and to each other. And we never really know how old they are, or where they came from, or how they developed. We are all brothers and sisters under the skin, and folklore is the ribbon of words and art that weaves around us. And so now, time for today's ribbons of words and art, and today's tales. Today I am going to tell you tales of a very special place for myself and my family, a place extremely connected to my family's history, and one of my most sacred heart homes. This place has woven a thread through so many generations of my family, and the stories and memories are beyond measure. It is a small village resting in a slight hollow. To know it is to love it, and those who love it are spellbound. It even has a Facebook page of its own, so dedicated are the worldwide fans of this little village. And where is this place? It is Crantock, named for St. Crantock, and in Kernowic language, Langarrow, Langarrow, the dwelling of the monks. This episode is dedicated to my mum and dad and brother, and all our little fur family, past and present, who were with us in Crantock. Our Cornwall and Crantock memories are strong, so long as we remember to tell our own stories to the next generations. I remember still so vividly the dairy in the village, when I was a child, where we could get milk directly from the churn. They made their own clotted cream too, and this was sublime. The older village folks pottering around the little shop and selling handmade crafts in the community hall, and walking green lane to rushy green that runs quietly and almost secretly from one end of the village to the dunes. The dunes are sadly now collapsing, and then a wide open vista of blue-green or slate-grey sea opens up and takes your breath away with its beauty. It always did for me as a child. It was heart-stopping. And in the bay stands Goose Rock, the goose, and her chick is nearby too, always watching over the bay. Nowadays we have to head to the small car park though, and walk to the beach along the River Gannel to protect the precious dunes, and rightly so. The Gannel is a most deadly stretch of water, but more of this later. And from this path too the bay opens up, dark slate almost black headland reaching out into a wild sea, and golden sand soft as sugar, and the rolling waves beat time on the shore, and sometimes tropical shells, jewel-like gifts from the mermaids. As we walk towards the caves and the rock pools on the far side of the bay, we find deep gouges in the sand created by the waves, sculpted and filled with the most beautiful clear aquamarine water. Piper's Pool can be found at the end of the headland there, huge deep rock pools teeming with life and full of colour. Fresh spring water drips down the cliffs here too, and has created a wall of dripping moss that seems almost spiritual. We used to call it Buddha Rock. And as we are near the cliffs, huge caves open up. High above, pigeons and jackdaws perch and swoop. Waves fill these caves at high tide, and as the tide recedes, deep pools of water are left, tempting to walk into but unnervingly deep, and rather unsettling in their clarity. And hidden deep among the caves, scattered here and there, and sometimes completely buried by the soft sand after high winter tides, are carvings, ancient graffiti carved into the slate, sometimes names and dates stretching back in time, but intriguingly there are figures too. One has a mermaid which I have to admit I have yet to find, but the most famous cave carving has quite a tragic legend, and it still intrigues. It is the face of a woman, and nearby it a tiny horse, and a poem carved so beautifully and so very poignant. Mar not my face, but let me be, secure in this lone cavern by the sea. Let the wild waves around me roar, kissing my lips forevermore. So who is this mystery lady, and what is the folklore surrounding her? One legend has it that a young woman was riding the beach here at Crantock. The tides are notoriously fast to come in, and they cover the sands within a turn of a head, eventually to the foot of the dunes. It is very easy to be exploring the caves and find the sea is lapping at the entrance already. Time seems to stand still for we humans, but time moves fast for some of the waves. The young woman and her horse could not beat the incoming waves, rough and speeding they were. Taking what she thought was safe shelter in one of the caves, she found herself cut off from the dry land. Sadly she perished, and so did her faithful steed at Piper's Hole. Eventually her body was found after much searching, and her sweetheart carved a memorial to her on the rocks where she had lain. And this would explain the beautiful delicate carvings of the lady and the horse. But what can be discovered by a little further research? Now, the horse was believed to have been carved by local fellow James Dyer, in which case this would be dated to the 1940s. In 2011, the local parish council paid for a stone carver to tidy up the horse and add a little tail. Now, I thought I was imagining this because I always remembered a horse with no tail as a child. Turns out I was right. It was tailless for decades. Now, to our lovely lady and her tragic poem. Locally, it is passed down knowledge that the carvings were done by a man with the name of Joseph Prater, and here lies a rabbit hole to drop into. There are two Joseph Praters that could fit the bill. One idea is that one of the artist brothers, Joseph and William Prater, was responsible for the carvings. These two brothers rented little huts on the cliff top here, and these they made into their studios. Their subjects were the seascapes and landscapes of this gorgeous area of North Cornwall. This would seem quite a good choice. The carvings are beautifully and very expertly rendered, perfect lettering, engravings, and a fine, strong female face full of character. The huts they rented were nearby what is now the Crantock Bay Hotel, so just above the Pipers area. This family was normally large for the era. Father Joseph Prater Sr. and Mother Jane Harriet Larkin, along with 8 brothers and 1 sister, all of them artists by nature and some professionally so. It was the father who was originally from Crantock, and it explains why they returned as a family from London over the years. In the pretty local graveyard are laid to rest many from the Prater family of Crantock. Joseph Prater, the artist, was born in the capital in 1862, passing away in 1932, and he never married. Could it be he had fallen for a local Crantock girl and the carving was his eternal love letter to her? Or sadly, could it be a memorial to the family's only daughter, Jane, who passed away in 1895 at the tragically young age of only 38 years? We cannot truly know, but now the rabbit hole gets even deeper. The Prater family were rather well connected in London and would have known many influential people there, and during the late 1800s and early 1900s, Crantock was becoming increasingly popular as a tourist destination. One visitor, also from London, was Ethel de Medina Greenstreet, née Spender, wife of a mathematician and editor William J. Greenstreet. The Spender family were famous as writers and artists. Edith herself was a writer, and her focus was mainly on young children, among whom she had many fans. Sadly, Edith met her death by getting into difficulties while bathing at Crantock Beach. Her maid, Kate Wilkes, who was only 17, also passed away. Was one trying to help the other to safety? We just don't know. Desperate attempts were made to revive both ladies, but neither survived. Edith is buried in Crantock's parish church. Her death at Crantock Bay, along with her maid in 1904, was covered by all the national newspapers. Joseph would most probably have known Edith, as back in London they mixed in very similar circles of artists and writers, and probably in Crantock too. And with the Crantock connection, did they know each other well? Was this a memorial to her? And why? This is obviously a work of love and care and dedication, and a lot of hard work at that. Was there a deeper connection to each other? This we can never know, and maybe it is just me being romantic that this was his memorial to her. Maybe a lost love. Another Joseph Prater was suggested as the mystery artist behind this beautiful artwork, and this was Joseph Henry Prater, dairyman at his father's family farm that was based in Crantock. The cattle would graze the land in the fields just above the Piper's Pool and Piper's Hole area. He had been baptised at the nearby little village of Cubert, possibly living at Holwyn with his wife Lily Jenkin, whom he married in 1913. Could this be an image of Lily? I don't think this is him. I think the most obvious artist is the professional artist Joseph Prater, and I think this is possibly his sister, and as this was somewhere they both obviously loved and with a deep family connection, he carved a memorial to her so she could eternally gaze out to the seas that they knew so well and would have visited time and time again from childhood. As we leave Crantock village and head down the steep hill to what is now the little car park that leads to the beach, we pass many pretty old cottages and the mostly hidden holy well of St Ambrose that sometimes disappears underneath foliage completely. Carrying on down and down, we pass the ancient Green Lane, standing there into prehistory. I used to run along this to the beach. More fields, and eventually the parish church of St Crantock, sitting high upon its hill. Then we find the car park and head over the dunes there, where the sand slips beneath your feet, so every step is worth 10 as you clamber up the slipping sand. At the top we find the view of our goal, the River Gannel. This winds from way inland to the sea, kissing the Celtic Sea there at Pentyre. It is incredibly pretty, and walkers of the southwest coastal path have to either wait for the little boats to carry them over, or at low tide dare the skinny walkway that makes a mini bridge across. Once there was a higher bridge, but this has long since gone. The prettiness of this river hides its deadly nature. the Gannel can be extremely dangerous, and I believe it is one of the most dangerous waters within Cornwall. Many lives have been lost to this stretch of water, the riptides and whirlpools, the extremely fast flow of the river, and of course, as with all stretches of water like this, there are legends and folklore. Strange sounds sometimes breach the surface of the Gannel, as if a creature or a spirit of the river is calling out. This is a haunted river. Locals would fear to be near it at certain times of the day and the night. The name given to this evil river spirit was the Crake. There was once a bitter and twisted old fellow who lived at the village of Penpole, further up the Gannel, inland. He was a mean-spirited and untrustworthy fellow, a worthless man. There was nothing good about him at all. One of his neighbours, though, was an old lady, and it was a dark night when word came to him that she was in desperate need of a priest. She was very close to death, and she would have him fetch the vicar to hear her confession and be her comfort as she passed. Surprisingly, this old reprobate, he agreed. He set off on his journey to fetch the local priest, and very easily crossed the Gannel, which was at low tide. The priest gathered together all he needed for the last rites and confession, and set off with the old miser back to cross the river. But now the two men found that even in this short space of time the tide had turned, and the river was now deep and soon deeper, and it was flowing extremely fast. The priest waded across, determined to help the old lady. The old man, though, he lost his footing and the Gannel took him. From that day, his ghost is said to wander the river. His evil deeds barred him from entrance to heaven, and the devil didn't want him either. Instead, he was sent back to the earth to constantly wail and moan about his misfortune and scare the heck out of the local villagers and fishermen for eternity, and also to take the lives as he can, and sadly often still does. Once, away back in history, there was a town, even a city by our own measure, filled with excess and wealth and too much of everything, and of course this situation never leads to anything good. This place was filled with the worst vices of the human race. It was a place of renown that was spoken of in hushed tones. Some longed to be there, would leave farms and fishing villages to never be seen again, swept up in the debauchery of this extremely shady place. And the name of this town, filled with too much bad and not enough good, was Langarrow. This was a vast city stretching from Crantock and the Gannel all the way to Perranporth. All that is left now are the lumps and bumps of a landscape filled with ridiculously high dunes and towns, said to be the covered remains of Langarrow. And Langarrow was vast. It thrived hundreds of years ago, even 1,000 in our reckoning, and this place had 7 churches, all as equally beautiful as each other. The townsfolk prospered like no other in the whole county or the whole country of England, growing wealthy on tin mined locally, fish from the sea, and wood fine enough for the best carvings. It was in these times that prisoners from all over Britain would be sent to Langarrow to work in the mines and dig for the rich tin, to build a harbour on the Gannel deep enough for broad ships carrying goods out and even more exotic riches in. These convicts were not allowed to live in Langarrow. They had to make their meagre homes among the rocks or scrape dwellings from the fields. For many, many years the city just grew and grew, and the riches grew and grew also, and the convicts suffered more and more as demand for more and more grew and grew, and also did the evil that dwelled within the hearts of these convicts, and the lasciviousness of the people of Langarrow. The wealthy folk of Langarrow cared not one bit for the inhumanity of it all. They only cared about gaining more, everything, and with this came sin. Every type of vile act that could be imagined occurred in Langarrow, and even some we would not bear to think of. Who cared? They were the envy of everywhere else, and they could do as they damn well wished. The many long years of convict settlement and fine city mingled and merged over time, and before long there was very little difference between either. The convicts married into the high-born families, bringing their evil with them and cultivating bloodlines full of vice. It became a living nightmare of a place. Until one day. It was said by those who remembered Langarrow long after that it was the wrath of God that turned up in the city. Its evil ways punished, swift and all-consuming. For 3 long days and nights storms raged over the place like nothing that had ever been seen before, or since. 3 days of violent swirling sandstorm. And then the sands blew from all directions, covering everything with a blanket of peace, cleansing. Nothing was left of Langarrow once the storm had finished, except a distant memory that brought a shudder and a range of steep valleys, towers and dunes. Crantock, in history, and now found out by archaeologists, has been found to have been a wealthy trading post in the history. So many relics of populations lost have been found, and yet a destruction of what was there before so immediate that surely these are the remains of the time of the destruction of Langarrow. Even into the 1800s there were memories recorded of farmhouses buried by fine sands lifted and dumped on them in a matter of a day, completely buried, only to be unearthed decades later when more windstorms would carve the sands from the buildings, bringing them back to sight, the ruins of what were once homes. Some of these storms brought up to 12 foot of fine, suffocating sand that buried everything in its wake. Terrifying. And today in Crantock the dunes are moving again. Where I used to run down with my brother from Green Lane to the beach, fast as our little legs could carry us, are now dangerous cliffs of subsiding and collapsing sand with danger signs to protect visitors and walkers. I hope the dunes return to Crantock someday, and I hope they can be saved, because nothing can take away my childhood memory of running and slipping and falling flat on my face onto a soft bed of golden sand scattered with tiny, precious jewel-like shells. Finally, in this episode dedicated to our beloved Crantock, we come to a dastardly tale of crime and punishment. Yes, even in a tiny village like Crantock, the long arm of the law reaches out to grab those committing acts of violence and evil. And in this case, our tale's baddie was called William Tinney, and he was the last man to be held in the stocks at Crantock. William Tinney was born to be bad. His family was some of the worst in the whole area. His upbringing was one of theft and learning the skills of a Cornish smuggler, skills taught by his own dear father, William Tinney Sr., who was by work a farmer. The farm, though, was a pitiful thing, and as with most of the poor Cornish, smuggling was a way to supplement the working wage, as was wrecking. And everyone in the family would be part of these crimes, from the eldest to mere toddlers. Everyone had their place in the gang. William had been one of these errant children, born into crime and carrying on the family tradition. In his records he calls himself a vagabond, a man of the road, in other words a vagrant, or if you're in America, in the States, a hobo. And yet Tinney was most active in the parish of Crantock and around abouts, and to all he was known as a bit of a rogue, but all in all, pretty good-natured for a thief. The village of Cubitt is not so far from Crantock. It's another little village nestled in the North Cornish countryside and quite close to Holywell Bay. In 1817, William Tinney decided Cubitt would be his hunting patch for victims he could rob and housebreak, and so off he set for Cubitt and found the perfect victim, a widow, elderly and fragile. We don't know what happened during the robbery or what the hell happened in Tinny's head, but he beat the widow black and blue. This violent act left the woman seriously injured and the village folk furious, appalled, desperate for revenge. They would serve justice to Tinny. Forget the local magistrate, justice would be served cold and hard by the villagers. In Crantock, near the church, stands the village stocks. For any listeners who don't know, the stocks are a medieval form of punishment whereby a criminal would have his ankles, wrists or sometimes head placed in a hole made between two planks of wood. One end of the plank is hinged and the other can be locked, and in this way the criminal is held fast, unable to leave, sometimes even to move. Once pinned down in this way, the locals are encouraged to hurl insults at those in the stocks, and sometimes not just insults, the crowd would also hurl rotting food, anything disgusting that they could get their hands on. Everything was fair game to be thrown at the criminal. However, this was 1817 and stocks had not been in use for over a century. I guess the village decided that the best and most immediate punishment would be for every single villager from the area to show their utter contempt and disgust at Tinny's violence. He would become not just an outcast, but also a complete laughingstock, where the term actually comes from. The stocks in Crantock are dated back to the 1600s, and nowadays they are kept as an ancient relic of harsher times where justice could come in any form. Now, carved on the stocks is a little poem that reads, "I paid my price for finding out, nor ever grudged the price I paid, but sat in clink without my boots, admiring how the world was made." You could spend a lot of time sat in the stocks. In Tinny's day, these stocks were inside the tower of St Crantock's church, and this would be where Tinny would be held for a few days, sat in his own filth and trapped by his ankles. However, things did not quite go to the plan that the villagers had. It was recorded by the Reverend George Metford Parsons in 1896 that one of the members of his parish, a Richard Chagwidden, who was 10 at the time of Tinny's punishment, that he had witnessed the escape of William Tinny. The reprobate had a man on the inside working on his behalf, and this fellow was the man who would make sure that the stocks fitted close to Tinny's ankles, which of course he didn't do. Instead, Tinny only pretended that he was stuck fast in the holes, as his friend left plenty of room for Tinny to squeeze out his feet. The next thing the villagers knew was Tinny was on top of the church tower. Word spread far and wide that the rogue had escaped and was running about on top of St Crantock's church. From the top of the tower, Tinny let down a long rope he had cut from the church bells, and now he tied it to the roof, climbed down to the nave and jumped to the floor. A combination of grudging respect and shock overtook the whole crowd, and nobody moved as William Tinny legged it across the fields as fast as his feet could carry him. William Tinny was never seen again. And so, dear friends, there we have a very personal episode of Folklore for me. Thank you for allowing me to share this with you. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. There are a couple of other Crantock tales, one of a strange sea monster that I found that was sighted in the Gannel by many people, including the owner of the then local tea shop, of a ghost that haunts the cellar of the local pub called the Old Albion, but I couldn't find enough about them to add a longer story to the episode, but I do feel that they needed mentioning as well. If anybody knows the stories, please let me know in the comments. As I have said before, Cornwall runs in my veins and through my family history, and I believe if anyone loves a place that runs through their veins too, maybe they've only visited there once, but it affects them so much it sticks to them like goosegrass and seeps into their hearts and bones and becomes a living part of them. And because of this love, the places do not die. They do not become ghosts of their former selves. I don't like the gatekeeping of places that seems quite prevalent nowadays, because everyone can be affected by a place for no earthly reason at all, without logic, Maybe it's an inherited memory, I don't know. But one thing I do know is none of us have ownership of place really. The places of the world belong to us all, and we have a right to love them, visit them and cherish them and feed them that love and energy. I am not saying sacred tribal sites should become tourist attractions, but that every single one of us can be affected by a place and feel within our bones or souls a deep, real connection, and often have absolutely no idea why. And not one person on earth has a right to deny that, no matter where that may be. And so long as places are treated with respect, and the people who are there already, if it is somewhere loved, this respect comes naturally. There is no gatekeeping necessary. There is no ownership necessary. It is our planet, it is our home, it is our past and our present and our future, and we should celebrate that, care for our earth as much as we can, and care for the beauty we know with others, so they can experience it too. We are here for a very short time. These places remain when we're gone. As I say, leave no trace, and no gatekeepers, no ownership. I'll link below to our favourite Cornish YouTube channel that we always watch every time they post a new episodes. And this is Cornish Walking Trails. It is a fabulous channel with a wonderful couple who host it. I hope you will tell me and describe your heart home places so that I can Google them and learn more about your heart homes too. Whether there is a memory there that's personal to you or your family, or somewhere that you've been that you just have no idea why there is that intense pull. Please do tell me where, so that I can find out more. So until next time, dear friends, after such a ramble, do take the best of care, brightest of blessings, and remember, don't play with the fairy folk or go in the River Gannel, or you may end up in one of my folk tales yourself, or even in the stocks.